Hey y'all, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and here we do all things spooky, but specifically this month, I am doing nothing but daily uploads of stories that you guys have sent in to me, so please send me those stories. Speaking of that, that email is linked below, along with my other social medias and podcast episodes and things like that, and even when March starts, I'm still doing this 5 days out of the week, so please send in those stories because I want to read them and be terrified. Speaking of being terrified, this first story we're going to read is about the black-eyed children. Ever heard of them? If not, I'm envious of you because they're terrifying. But let's get into it. The following is composed from a British news article. The black-eyed children have reportedly been spotted by a young couple while camping at Cannock Chase. The couple claimed a giggling short girl encircled their tent before moving in ways humans simply can't move, to hide behind trees. While some think the sightings are not real, others believe she is the tormented soul of a young girl who was unalived in the area during the 1960s. There have been sightings of her reported in the Staffordshire forest since the 1980s. I don't know why I couldn't say that word. Kylie and Ben say they saw the ghost at Birches Valley during the summer of 2021. The two teenagers, whose names have been changed to protect their identity, decided to camp illegally in the middle of the forest. But as they told the author, Lee Brinkley, it was a decision they would soon live to regret. It was around midnight when the teens heard something moving outside their tent. Thinking it could be a deer, they remained still and quiet, not wishing to scare it. But when they realized they could hear footsteps, they unzipped the tent to take a peek. Both campers heard the unmistakable sound of a small child giggling, so they turned on their torches, lighting up the shadowy woodland to try to find the source. Ben saw it first, running from tree to tree, hiding behind the trunks, occasionally peering out towards the couple before finally stepping into the clearing in front of them. Kylie said, "I was absolutely terrified. I'd read the stories in the news about the black-eyed child, but it wasn't until this thing stood right in front of me that I could quite believe them. I knew instantly that we were dealing with this real thing because it moved in ways humans simply can't move. It was like it couldn't teleport from one place to another when it was moving around and hiding behind trees." Ben added, "As I was shining my torch right at her, she just stood there staring at us with her head slightly dipped. That's when the giggling started to get louder and louder. It really sounded like it was coming from all around us, even though I could see that she was right in front of me. It was really disorienting for a few seconds. Then she bent down for a moment as if adjusting her shoe, stood back up, and ran off down a nearby path through a dense section of trees." The frightened pair huddled together in their tent, waiting for the sun to rise. When they emerged at 7 a.m, they found piles of stones evenly placed around the perimeter of their tent, and strange formations hanging from the trees, which looked like dream catchers. Slightly shaken, they packed up and started the 15-minute walk back to Ben's car. Suddenly, Kylie spotted a small child with black eyes peering back at her from behind an oak tree and screamed, "Ben!" Ben shouted, "Leave us alone," as the pair ran off towards the vehicle. Author Lee Brinkley has been investigating the supernatural occurrences at Cannock Chase for over a decade and has released 4 books about his findings. He believes that he has his own encounter with the black-eyed children in Birches Valley back in April of 2018. "She appeared about 100 meters in front of me," he said. "She stared right at me for about 30 seconds, then vanished." He also claims to have witnessed someone in an old soldier's uniform walk into the German war cemetery, only to discover after following them inside that they disappeared. When asked why he believed there was so much supernatural activity on the site, Lee said, "I tend to believe that Cannock Chase is somewhat of a paranormal portal area where beings and entities from the next world can migrate into our own. I believe the woods are haunted with many spirits of the dead, but there are also a lot of monster sightings that happen here. I think those creatures come from another much darker place." Thank you for reading this. I just discovered your YouTube and already love it. If you'd like any other stories, mostly from England, feel free to ask. Okay, so I don't think that was like any personal stories. I think they just wanted to share a clipping from something that happened there, which is absolutely horrifying. I love black-eyed children stories. And fun fact, I'm actually a voice actor in a movie called Black-Eyed Children that should be out this year. I don't know, I just got the screener for it and I'm really excited to watch it. That's just a little fun fact to throw in there. All right, next story. I'm from a small town in Alabama, right at the tip of the Appalachian Mountains, closest to Georgia and Tennessee. I've had haunted stuff happen in my life as long as I can remember, but this was just the worst thing. I was on my way home from dropping off my cousin one night after Sunday night church. I don't remember what year it was, but I think I was 16 or 17, so around 3 or 2 years ago. I've always been into creepy or haunted things, but I know the rules that I shouldn't have been out late at night, especially not this night for some reason. I was driving on the main road through a small town. On the right side of the road was a field and woods where deer occasionally ran out, and on the left was a side of the patch of woods with a house on the left and a small church on the right. As I was driving, I had this feeling to slow down, so I just assumed it was a deer. I've always had gut feelings, and I've learned over the years to trust them. I slowed down right as something on the right side of the road moved in the weeds. They're very tall during this time of the year. I think it was around April or May. I stopped my car in the road to let the deer pass, but when it came out of the woods, it wasn't a deer at all. I don't know what this thing was and barely know how to describe it. Its body was almost like Okay, I've never seen Harry Potter, so I have no idea who this is. Remus Lupin? Who's that?
What was the name again?
Remus Lupin? From the third Harry Potter movie. When he's a werewolf, but a lot skinnier and more of like a rotting flesh gray. But that's where the similarities end.
That's like, you used to play Skyrim. It looks a lot like the Skyrim werewolves.
Ew! I was in my Chevy Cruze, and this thing stood tall enough that I didn't have to sit up in my seat to see it. It walked out on all fours, and that's when I got a better look. It looked like a gray, rotting skin color and was built, like I said, like a werewolf when it comes to its body, except a lot skinnier and malnourished. Its ears were pinned back against its head, and it had coyote-like ears, but more of the size of a wolf than coyote. It didn't have a snout like a dog, though. I started having a panic attack watching it, and that's when it stopped in the road and turned to look at me. It had large, almost glowing yellow eyes and snake-like slits in them. I don't remember it having a nose. It made eye contact with me, and that's when I saw it. The thing opened its mouth, which was full of sharp teeth, and smiled from ear to ear. I started crying. I thought this thing was going to rip me apart because of the evil that I felt. It smiled at me and then slunk off to the other side of the road and disappeared. I had about a 4-minute drive home after that, and I went at least 70 in a 55 trying to get there. Now, I don't know if these things are connected, but April 16th or 17th, my Great Dane went missing. So it was after that I saw this creature. He was an odd dog, but I loved him and grieved him very much. Right after I saw this thing, I started hearing my dog bark. If you know Great Danes, they have a very recognizable bark, and I know my dog's bark. I thought we found my dog, so I looked out of my second floor window, and I saw a figure sitting below my window. I knew it was watching me. I closed my curtains and laid back down. I didn't tell anyone what happened that night until a week or so later. I told my dad I felt like I was losing my mind because I kept hearing my dog until my dad said that he didn't want to say anything, but he heard it too. The room was right below mine, but my mom didn't hear it until my dad and I. Around the same time, I started hearing whistles at night, but I ignored them and started sleeping downstairs in our living room on the other end of the house from my room. I never heard or saw anything again after this, at least not that I think it's related to. I love your channel and would like to know what you think this was. You don't want to know what I think it was. You don't want to know what I think it was. But I will say you're close enough to the Appalachian Mountains that was definitely something that resides in those mountains that you encountered. And you just got very lucky that all it did was smile at you and copy your dog's bark. But they do that. They will literally copy anything they can to get your attention, to get you to look. And it worked because they used your dog's bark, and it's rude. And I wish they didn't do stuff like that. All right, next story. My prior story was crazy. My prior story was the one about the patio and the duckling. This will be a collection of stories from myself and a few friends. I'm not sure how scary they'll be to others because to me this is normal. First up, grandfather. Here's a little bit of context. Oh my God. Here's a little bit of context. I've never met my grandfather as he passed 3 years before my birth. My mom was really close to her dad and they were best friends, not just parent and child. Let's call it grandfather H. Now to the story. I was about 3 in 1996 when this happened, so I don't remember much of it, but it sure creeped my mom out. I was chatting to myself in the living room, and Mom popped her head in around the kitchen door to make sure I was all right. According to her, I was looking up as if I were looking up at someone who was about the height of my dad, which is almost 6 feet. She watched for a long moment before she asked, "Hey, what are you talking to?" I stopped talking and turned to look at her with a smile on my face as I said, "H." Mom said it was just like time stopped for a long moment. I'd asked her if I knew his name, and she said, "You could have, but I don't think so." There are pictures, I wish I could find them to share, taken at birthday parties and Christmases or other holidays that Mom thought were dust in the photos, but it wasn't until 1990 when she was watching The Sixth Sense for the first time that she noticed, like in other movies, I too was looking at the light anomalies in those photos. Anomalies. Is that what I said? Light anomalies in those photos. Ugh. Next, sleep paralysis. High school. Does anyone actually like it? I enjoyed learning, but the people, not so much. So this story takes place around late 2008, early 2012. The first time I had sleep paralysis, it was December of 2008. It came with a reoccurring dream, and I had to keep it short. I was always looking for someone, my best friend or my parents. Until 2011, it took me what felt like ages to pull myself out of those dreams and then out of paralysis. If I'd fall back asleep, the dream would pick right back up where it left off. What changed in 2011? An adorable calico kitty who I named Chaos. For context, she was an odd cat. She'd meow and carry a full conversation with you. She seemed more like a human most days. This baby, however, was my soul cat. The sleep paralysis stopped for a while after I got her. March of 2012, as all of the times prior I had the reoccurring dream, woke up and couldn't move. This time, though, I heard a growl. Not scary monster growl, but a really angry chaos growl. Just to note, this cat rarely growled or hissed. I was trying to move when I heard her hiss, which seemed to pull me out of the paralysis quicker. When I looked at her, she was on my pillow beside my head, back arched, ears back, fully ready to jump on something. I saw nothing as she swiped her paw at the air with her claws out, growling. I calmed her down by talking to her, but her eyes were not leaving the foot of my bed. After this, she got to where she'd sleep on my hip, and when she did, I didn't have sleep paralysis. When she didn't, I would, but she'd do the same thing every time I had an episode. Next, the Phantom. In this story, my mom and I bought some of the things to the house that I currently live in. This was in 2017 and it was noon. Mom and I had eaten lunch with my aunt and then packed the car and left to drive to my house. We'd been laughing and joking when a shadow about the size of a medium-sized dog darted in front of our car. It was so close to the car that even though Mom hit the brakes, we both knew something was about to get hit. We both braced, but no impact came. She asked with her eyes wide, "Did you see that?" "Yeah," I replied and got out of the car to look for an injured animal. There was nothing. Not in either ditch, not on the side of the road, under the trees, not in the fields. There was nothing. I got back in the car and we drove off. We were silent the rest of the way to the house. Dad was chatting on the patio when we pulled up, and he looked at us, smile fading, as he said, "Y'all look like you've seen a ghost." Mom and I just looked at each other before she launches into what happened, and he didn't believe it. Chaos the Ghost Cat. Oh no! No, 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 no. Oh, the way I'm about to skip this one. Hopefully I don't cry too much as I write this. In late 2022, we found out Chaos had a rare cancer. Rare for a cat because this cat could not be normal. Because of that, it was known as canine cancer. The vet who we were using, counting Chaos, it was his third time seeing it in a cat. Anyway, because of how rare it was and how quickly it moved, all we could do was make her comfortable. We wanted her to at least make it through Christmas, as she loved the tree, but she just had a biopsy, so we got her a small tree with lights until the stitches came out. We were worried she'd somehow get her stitches caught and in a panic pull them out if we tried to put up a big tree. Oof. It went how you'd think it'd go, but she did make it past Christmas. This is where I'll now say Sebastian is a cat that I rescued in 2017, and he was pretty close with Chaos. It's important. This story, however, takes place about a week after January 30th, 2023. I was walking through the house with Sebastian on my heels, and he didn't leave my side since January 30th, when a shadow darts past us and hops onto the bathtub. Chaos's favorite place to hide. Naturally, my first thought in spoken words were, "Chaos, you silly girl," and then it hit me that she was gone. So as calmly as I could, I walked over to the tub and looked inside. No cat. Each one of my roommates had 2 cats, and I started looking for them. Ewok is the male roommate's bedroom, sleeping soundly, and Chewy sleeping in the kitchen. Patches and Gizmo were in the female roommate's bedroom, sleeping. Sebastian had frozen in the hall and was still staring at the tub. Sebastian rarely makes any noise that's not insanely loud purring. Right then in the hall, he let out a soft meow and moved to the tub. He stood on his hind legs and looked for her like I had. He jumped when he heard me and gave me a look that said, "Mom, did you see that?" I ended up telling my parents when they were visiting. They'd seen her too. Mom saw what she thought was Sebastian hopping onto the bed to look over and see him sleeping in the chair in the room. Dad had seen a shadow dart from the computer room, which is near the front door, all the way to the end of the hallway and into my room. She still does this from time to time. The familiar voice. Both of my parents aren't in the greatest health, so I stay over with them from time to time. I've been staying over for about a week or so in 2024 when Mom had asked me one morning, "Did you say good morning at 4 in the morning?" I was giving her a breathing treatment as I replied, "No, why?" She looked at me for a long moment before she said, "Because I heard you at the foot of my bed at 4 a.m. saying good morning." I shrugged and asked, "Are you sure it wasn't farther away? Because I do sleep talk." She was sure it was my voice and that it came from the foot of her bed. The Walker. This is probably the creepiest story that I have to share that isn't mine. I believe this happened in later 2023 or early 2024. It's a neighbor from down the street, and I'll call her Mary for this. Mary, like most of us, had been hearing coyotes. We had all seen a few walking down the street in the middle of the day. She got up early, like normal, 4:30ish in the morning to let her horses out. Since the coyotes had sounded close, she grabbed protection before she left her house. The barn wasn't too far, but it wasn't close either. She kept her eye on the surroundings, walked to the barn, and reached the door to unlock it. Just as her fingers touched that lock, she heard from inside the barn, "Well, hi there," in a woman's voice. Mary bolted and said that she felt like she was being chased as she screamed for her husband, who came out of the house with protection. She'd completely forgotten that she'd brought some out of the barn. He looked around and swore he didn't see anything. They now go together to let the horses out. Frost Heart. My friend, let's call her R, was very close with her grandma. Just before she lost her, she had asked, "How will I know if you visit me?" The reply was, "Hearts." R, after losing her, was having a rough time, so much that she just yelled, "What's the point? You said you'd give me a sign." R calmed herself down and walked outside. It was cold and there was a layer of frost on everything. She looked up at her car and saw a heart in the frost, which brought all of the emotions and most of all brought her peace. An unfamiliar woman's voice. This happened right around when I sent the first story, so close to February 8th of 2025. I just came back in from feeding my chickens and was washing my hands when I heard a woman's voice say, "Hello?" Mom, who was watching TV in the other room, looked at me and said, "What did you say?" I didn't say anything, but I heard it too, I replied, and went to check it and make sure the house was locked. R was texting me at the time, and for context, she and her husband moved into the house that the odd guy lived in once we moved out. Back to the story, I explained when we were going on to R, she asked if we needed some help to search. I told her no, that I couldn't see anyone, and the house was locked up. I'll note that it was 9:30 in the morning, so it wasn't dark. Mom and I weren't bothered by it, but I said, if it gets to where it's bothersome, I'll cleanse the house. I've been a practicing witch since 2018, so nothing to worry about. That night when I was washing dishes, I put water on to boil for my tea and I drink at night to relax. I could feel someone behind me. Not bad, just curious and not bothersome. It was the next day that I decided to cleanse the house because Dad heard the voice. He heard, "Where is it?" My immediate thought was, "Where is the door?" Dad does not do paranormal or supernatural well, so it shook him up. So the next day I had the house to myself as my roommates were out of town and my parents weren't visiting. The sky was clear outside. This is important. Once my normal things were done, breakfast, pulling tarot, chatting with R, and feeding the chickens, I cleansed the house using a mix of things as there are multiple different belief systems in the house. Once I was finished by opening the door and letting it out, I looked up and noticed the sky had heavy rain clouds. I headed over to R's to chat for a bit and grab some selenite to put around the house. My grandfather was a jokester in life and remained one in death, as his way to try and lighten the mood more was to turn on Halloween decorations. At the time, I was a little annoyed until I realized who it was. I do have 3 more stories I can think of off the top of my head and most call unbelievable. I'd be right there with them if I'd not experienced it. I was going to put them in a separate email, but since I'm here, why not just share them? I knew the day before the world would change. I had just turned 8 in this story, and this story is hard to explain, but I'll do my best. September 10th, 2001. How can you hear me? You on the cusp of something about 9/11 and you hear it from miles away. We made the same face. You guys can't see it, but my husband's over there editing. He's supposed to be editing. I don't know how he heard me.
I got one AirPod.
Anyways, I looked over and we both were going... September 10th, 2001 was a normal school day until halfway through. I thought at the time that I was getting sick as my stomach was in knots. Something did not feel right. My chest was hurting. I was both hot and cold at the same time, and I pushed through the rest of the day, and when I got home, I told my mom I wasn't feeling well. She did the normal mom things like take my temperature, which was normal. I at 8 had no idea how to explain what I was feeling. The knotted stomach, my chest hurting as if full of congestion, the odd feelings of being both hot and cold, and then knowing something was not right. Mom told me it had just been a bad day, and I was trying to get out of going to school tomorrow as I did deal with some pretty severe bullying. She could tell I was upset as she tried to calm me by coloring or reading or watching TV. I couldn't focus on any of that. As the evening progressed, I felt what I now know as a sense of impending doom. I didn't sleep well, tossing and turning as I had this feeling that someone was in danger. At the time, my dad was a truck driver, so my first thought was him. Sometime in the night, I must have fallen asleep, and when I woke up on September 11th, 2001, it felt much worse. I told Mom again, and she checked my temperature, which was normal. Mom said, if it gets any worse, have them call your grandma because I'm going to be over there cutting her hair. My grandma only lived several blocks from the school. When I got to school, I felt nauseous and was worried I'd actually throw up. I went to class as usual, and I don't remember what time, but we were taken to the library. This made me panic because I didn't have my book. The teacher assured me that it wasn't library day, but we were going to watch the Magic School Bus, and there were 3 other classes. This was very odd, but the others were happy. No work, just Magic School Bus. All the symptoms persisted, but now I felt like I had lead weights attached. I felt like I had to try and explain that there are 2 TVs in the library because it's important. One in the front was a huge flat screen and a little box TV in the back. I was sitting near the library's desk as I was tall and didn't have to block the view for people behind me. I was really trying to focus on the show, and it was the episode where the school bus goes through the digestive tract, and I have no idea why I remember that. That's like the only episode of that show that I do remember. As I was sitting there attempting to watch the TV, I heard, "You need to turn around." Confused, I looked around. The voice I heard was male, soft but firm. I ignored it because I had no idea what to think. "You need to turn around," the man's voice said again. I remember thinking, I don't want to. The reply was immediate. You have to. You have to know. Slowly, I turn around and look at the staff around the other TV. I watched the video that someone had taken saying, "I hope those are chairs." They were not. I watched the second plane hit, and I turned back around confused and now terrified. There's more to see. I glanced back in time to see the tower fall and all the sick feeling I had lessen. I knew this is what I was feeling, but I didn't understand how. Ooh, well, that's a lot. Woof. Next up, I knew someone was going to die. This happened in 2019, the whole year leading up to this event. I kept getting a thought that didn't feel like my own. At first thought was a man was dead in the yard. This thought was random when it would pop up close to once a month. As the year went on, the thought changed to a man dead in the yard who was working on something. This thought happened more than the first. Twice a month and once a week until the day of. The day of, it was a loop in my head, and no matter what I did to distract myself, it didn't work. By this point, I was having chest pains with the thought. It stopped around 3:30 or 4 p.m. A few minutes later, we got a phone call. The call to let us know that my mom's brother had passed in the yard working on his granddaughter's car. He passed from a heart issue. Huh? Grandma told me. I enjoy true crime tarot readings. Someone I watch for true crime also does astrology readings. Not my thing, and yet I felt called to watch one of hers. I'm a Virgo, but my friend R is a Libra. To the story. I was really only half listening, as I said, not my thing, but it gets to Libra, and she says someone has a grandma on the other side, and she's cross with you. Attention snatched. The reader used this context of a relationship in which the grandma was upset because of the stagnation in the relationship. I heard, not relationship, business. The last card she pulled had hearts on it, a sign from R's grandmother. I watched this January 29th, 2025. The next morning I was chatting with R as we normally do in the mornings. We send our tarot and oracle spreads to each other. She reads her cards and a good opportunity would present itself, but she wouldn't be able to do it alone. I, however, read it as her restarting her business. The idea made her excited, and as we were chatting about it, her phone went off with an email. The email was for her to set up her own stuff in a stall at a farmer's market, which she accepted. I told her about the video I watched and about her heart showing up. Aw. Thank you so much to everyone that sent me in a story, and I am terrified. Some of those were rough, but I will see you guys tomorrow for even more terror.